Okay, so here we're looking at, we're not talking about agroforestry here, you're talking about over there. We're talking about a bit about cultivations, I suppose. And so what we're looking at now is a ley at the end of its second year. It's not absolutely right, and I had to get this completely right when Janet Hughes was here, but it starts its life off as a pollen and nectar ley. And so in the first year it's a pollen and nectar ley. Then when we re-sow our pollen and nectar leys in year 2, this then becomes a sheep grazing ley. So it does something for pollinators in its first year, and then that's transferred over to another part of the farm. And then the second part of the second year is a sheep grazing ley. So pollinators building soil fertility. Absolutely superb. So we haven't ploughed any of our leys now for, and I keep on saying it's 5 or 6 years, but it's probably more than that. And so what we've been doing is trying to work out how to not plough them in, because what we don't want to be doing is by turning all this lovely stuff into the bottom of the furrow, even though, you know, it's quite nice to start off with a weed-free situation. The fact is, at the end of the day, we're still managing these leys with sheep and occasionally with mowing to give ourselves a reset button as far as weeds are concerned. So the two machines that we're using is one over here, which is quite a high horsepower tractor, and I put some work rates up here as well, and you can see this comes out at about £55 a hectare to have a 350 horsepower tractor on this, pulling at 4.4 meters. Now that's the thing that we've been using successfully for a number of years. Now we can do it successfully here because we're in the dry east, and so we get a lovely dry time in the in September. So we go through, usually when we're breaking leys, we'll do it in August, at the beginning of August. So it dries out. We then have 2 passes with the cultivator before we drill with our chameleon. But that's jolly expensive. I suppose my aim is, and I announced this to Andrew, who drives the biggest tractor on the farm, that my aim is to get down to 3 small tractors if we possibly can do that. I'm really sorry, Andrew. But anyway, so that's the aim, because to have 3 200 to 240 horsepower tractors, we're doing 4,500 hectares with 3 tractors. That's going to be a pretty low horsepower per hectare, and that's our aim. The other thing about these prices, of course, if you buy a second-hand tractor and a second-hand cultivator, you can save a lot of money doing that. The reason why we don't do it, and we have a sort of a structured machinery replacement regime, is because actually we just, on that amount of land, we just need reliability. And we just find that we get that if we have that sort of policy, but it doesn't mean to say that it's the right one. So the machine that we've just bought and we tried for the first time last year was this FarmMet cultivator, and it just basically halves the cost of the operation, because it's a smaller tractor, and rather than costing £68,000 for the Gregoire best one, it costs £16,500 to buy the Phantom. Now it doesn't leave it as nice and level as the Gregoire Besson does, but that's absolutely fine. If you go and walk in there now and you kick a few clods, because we've done it at a time of year where we normally wouldn't do it, you will probably find 1 or 2 bits of soil that hasn't been moved. But when we were using it last year in the autumn, it was incredibly successful. So I'm very keen that works, and we'll be using it this year to see if we can, you know, if there's a possibility that we could do everything with it. Are there any questions before we move on to the next bit? Yes, William.
How many times over with that?
So primary cultivation once.
Yeah.
Second time is with on a ley is with our Vallistair carrier in the yard, because it's got a light disc, and if there's anything that hasn't been moved, it'll flick that over. It also does a little bit of levelling, and then just before drilling, we're through with a Dalbo. Sorry, it's a FarmMet. We had a Dalbo for a FarmMet of 9 metre cultivator. So 2 light cultivations afterwards, and then it's drilling time. Yes. I was going to say the word matron after that, but sorry. Could you repeat that again? I wasn't. Joe Franklin, can you stop laughing? No, no, we haven't. I mean, there's certainly no problem with that. No. We didn't put any layers up with that last year because we didn't have it. That was used for doing all our pre-spring cropping. No, we didn't. We just used it in the spring this year, didn't we? Yes. That's completely correct, because actually when they brought it out in the autumn, they wanted to use it in the autumn. I looked at it and I said, well, that's just ridiculous, that won't work. Then we tried it in the spring, and we were pulling up, so we had some cover crops, and we had this field over the other side here, which was in our living mulch that failed because of all the thistles, as you can see at the moment. And we tried it in that, and it did an amazing job. Yeah. So I think probably what will happen is that this will probably still have to break the lays, and rather than ploughing any of the other stuff, we'll probably use that on stubbles. But then, of course, what we really want to do, Mark, is to use our living mulch and not do any cultivating at all, apart from a little bit of strip tilling, which is what I'm going to do. So do you want to hear a little bit about that or not? Okay, so we're doing this living mulch, and Mark's doing the same thing. The only thing I think that we're doing different is that we're using a strip till cultivator just to take out the rows of where the crop had grown. So in between the rows where the crop isn't, we're going to have this living mulch, and we're using the same two species of clover two varieties of clover that Mark is using. And the idea is just to take out a little narrow strip where we sow our cash crops. There's several reasons for that. First of all, I'm very worried about, certainly in the east, the clover competing for moisture with our cash crops, and we need to control it. And so this strip till will do it. So the idea is to sort of literally till maybe a couple of inches, even an inch and a half, if we possibly can. The other thing is that we need to mineralize a little bit of nitrogen, and we need to mineralize some nutrients, because in a true regenerative rotation, when you have lays and you're building fertility and are not using any artificial fertilizers, you need to mineralize that bit to feed your crops. And so I feel that that's going to do that for us as well. As far as I know, Clive Bailey is going to be mowing his with a little dinky mower sort of thing that goes in between the crops. I'm rather naively hoping that our sheep are going to be able to do that. So the idea is after harvest, or let the clover get up a bit if we're plucking a spring crop, is to let the clover get up a bit and then graze it with the sheep over winter, but lightly graze it so they don't, because we've still got our other lays around the farm. If it's going into a winter crop, I suppose it gives us the opportunity to graze our winter crops pre-Christmas with the sheep. And again, rather naively thinking that actually if the sheep come off a clover lay like this and then go onto the living mulch lay, which is also clover, they generally spend a bit of time eating the stuff that they're used to eating. I'm not saying that grazing crops is bad, because we've done it before, and it, in my experience, it doesn't have any effect on yield, but you just get a bit of free grazing. So that's what we're doing with the living mulch. We're in our second year, and we're getting this cultivator made. I really want George Sly to make it, who's from the UK, but we're talking to a Dutch company as well. And so it's really whoever comes up with something that we think is going to work. So now we're going to go over here. Right. Okay, so is there anyone from Garford here? Because I love them. I love them. And we had a Garford hoe for a very long time, and they are the absolute perfect machine if it suits your soil type. We just find with a tine-based hoe that if you've got a soil resistance in it, so our soil's between 35 and 45% clay, it's just pushing that tine back, and every time that tine goes back, it's changing its hoeing profile. And so it tends to skip over sort of large, well-established weeds. Whereas this system works on a parallelogram design, meaning that it goes up and down. If you look at the blade, it's going in a single profile, so it's level all the time. So it doesn't matter what the land is doing or the weeds are doing; it's just sitting there horizontally, cutting the green material away from its roots, which is the key thing for inter-row hoeing as far as we're concerned. So this is a drill primarily, and well, it's a drill firstly, and then it has a hydraulic system that shifts it over in between the rows, and then it becomes a hoe. And because it's a lot of talk about penetration in hoes now, but anyway, we'll move on. So because it's a drill, when you're inter-row hoeing, you can also sow a crop as well. So if you're under sowing, you can do it at that point, or if you're wanting to put in a green manure, you can do it at that point as well. And this did you see the hoed and unhoed bit on the other? The trial bit, so you can go in very late. I mean, Greg did that literally 2 days before you came, so you can go incredibly late. So if you're wanting to get your green manure sown, pre-harvest, which I would suggest is quite a good time to do it, you could do it at that stage, which means when the harvester comes along, sunlight gets your green manures, and at least they've got a really early start. I don't know much more to say about it, other than I put lots of stuff up on social media, so do watch that. And if you want to buy one, anytime you want to come and see me, come and see me. Yes, 2 minutes. So the Treffler. Do we want to look at the harrow? Yes, come on, let's go. I find it very difficult to get excited about harrowcomb weeders, I have to say, because they're not particularly effective, but it is sort of one of those tools that actually they're relatively inexpensive and they do a job. So the job it does for us is that it gives us the ability in winter crops and spring crops also to go in when the plant's at about a 4-leaf stage, the crop is about a 4-leaf stage, which is really the earliest you can go in, and it takes out 1 or 2 broadleaf weeds, but it's not great, I have to say. The other thing we use it for is when we've been through the hose. Sometimes if you for whatever reason, for conditions, it hasn't gone as well as it might have done, then if you put that a couple of days after the hoe, it just pulls out 1 or 2 things that the hoe has left, but it also pulls out some weeds that grow within the crop rows. The other thing it's very good at, and we haven't got a cedar box on this one, but we got a cedar box on our ironbock in the yard, is that it's quite good for undersowing as well in the right conditions, but it's only successful if you've got a nice friable soil. And if you've got a compacted soil, if you've got a winter crop that you've rolled and you've had a huge amount of rain over the winter, if you can't get some soil going around these tines with the seed, with your undersowing, it generally isn't a great idea. The reason why we've gone for this one as opposed to the ironbock, which is the one, so we had 2 ironbocks before this, is that this system on these spring tines is just much more accurate, because every tine is individually sprung, and the other thing you can do is you can tension them on the go. So if you're on a field and you've got a bit of meadowland at the bottom which really needs a really good rake through, you can just whack the pressure up, really do a fantastic job. As soon as you come out, just release the pressure. So you can change the tension on the tines as you go, which is really useful. The other thing is that they make a tine with a tungsten tip on it, which means you don't have to keep on changing them, so they go for a much longer time. So as far as productivity is concerned, I suppose it's a good thing. And so, yes, I think that's my 2 minutes. Any questions, quickly? Yes, questions? No? Stunned everyone into silence. Excellent. Good. Except no questions from you, Pete, though. Yes. Andy, how are you?
All right, I'm fine.
Did you come on a bike?
Not this time.
Oh, okay.
But, when you were growing some Heritage Week, did you actually need to do any harrowing in between?
That's a very good question. So, that is a very good question, because actually, as far as weeds are concerned on the farm, the bit that you saw where we hoed in between the rows, if you hadn't been coming, I just wouldn't have bothered. There was a load of speedwell in the bottom, and there's an unhoed bit of oats and beans, I think, which is absolutely fine. But with the heritage wheat that Andy's talking about, which he supplied me with, is so competitive, actually you can just leave it alone and just don't do anything to it at all. It's just going to smother everything. And if it doesn't smother it when it's growing, when it sort of nearly wants to fall over and goes, it makes a mat on the soil. And but it's a really good point. And spelt, very rarely hoe spelt as well, because it's nice and tall and competes with weeds. All right, yeah. Right. All winter oats. Thank you so much.